The summer air hung heavy over Riverside in 1982. It was the kind of heat that made time slow down and memories blur at the edges. Children played in sprinklers, mothers hung laundry on clotheslines. The town existed in a bubble of American normalcy, where everyone knew their neighbors and doors stayed unlocked after dark. Nobody could have imagined that July would be the month everything changed. Amanda Crawford was 11 years old that summer. She had freckles across her nose and strawberry blonde hair that caught the sunlight. Her mother always said she smiled too much at strangers, but Amanda saw the good in everyone. She volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends and collected bottles and cans to raise money for a class trip to the state capitol. On the afternoon of July 23rd, she rode her bicycle to the community fair that had set up in the parking lot behind the old grain mill. The fair was modest by city standards: a few carnival rides, game booths with stuffed animals as prizes, vendors selling funnel cakes and lemonade. Amanda went with two friends from school, and they spent the afternoon trying to win goldfish and riding the spinning teacups until they felt sick. Around 6 in the evening, Amanda told her friends she was going to collect cans from the trash bins near the exit. She wanted to get a head start before the crowd left. Her friends waved goodbye and headed toward the parking area where their parents were waiting. Nobody saw exactly what happened next. One moment, Amanda was there, moving between the metal bins with her canvas bag. The next moment, she was gone. A witness later told police she remembered seeing a dark blue van idling near the back fence, but she had not thought anything of it at the time. Vans were common. Families used them, contractors drove them. There was no reason to be suspicious. When Amanda did not come home by 8 that evening, her mother Janet started making phone calls. She called the friends Amanda had gone with, then their parents, then anyone else who might have seen her. By 9, Janet and her husband Robert were driving through town, checking the streets and calling Amanda's name. By 10, they were at the police station filing a missing person report. The Riverside Police Department mobilized immediately. Chief Edward Martinez understood that the first 24 hours were critical in cases like this. Officers fanned out across town, volunteers organized search parties, flyers with Amanda's photograph appeared on every telephone pole and storefront window. The local radio station interrupted programming every hour with updates and pleas for information. The entire community held its breath and prayed for a miracle. 3 days later, a farmer discovered Amanda's body in a wooded area about 12 miles outside town. She was wrapped in a green tarp and partially concealed beneath fallen branches. The coroner determined she had been sexually assaulted and strangled within hours of her disappearance. The cause of death was asphyxiation. The manner of death was homicide. The town of Riverside descended into grief and fear. Parents stopped letting their children play outside unsupervised. The school district hired additional security. Neighborhood watch groups formed overnight. Church services swelled with people seeking comfort and answers. Amanda and Robert Crawford appeared on local television, their faces etched with pain, begging anyone with information to come forward. Detective Sarah Brennan was assigned to lead the investigation. She was 34 years old and had been with the department for 9 years. She had worked robberies, assaults, and drug cases, but never a child murder. The weight of it pressed on her constantly. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Amanda's school photograph, that bright smile frozen in time. The evidence collected from the scene was limited but significant. Forensic technicians found fibers on Amanda's clothing that did not match anything she had been wearing. There were blue carpet fibers, some kind of synthetic material. There were also several short brown hairs that appeared to be from a dog. Tire tracks near where the body was found suggested a vehicle with wider than average wheelbase, consistent with a van or truck. Most importantly, there were traces of paint transfer on Amanda's jeans, small flecks of dark blue automotive paint. Detective Brennan worked with the state crime lab to analyze everything. The carpet fibers were identified as a specific type of commercial-grade material commonly used in vehicle interiors during the late 70s and early 80s. The paint was a shade of blue used by one particular automobile manufacturer during a 3-year production window. The dog hairs were from a mixed breed, possibly part German Shepherd. It was good evidence, but without a suspect, it led nowhere. Interviews were conducted across the entire town. Police spoke to registered sex offenders in the area. They checked alibis and ran background checks. They followed up on every tip that came through the phone lines, no matter how unlikely. One caller claimed to have seen a blue van near the fairgrounds around the time Amanda disappeared. Another remembered a man acting strangely near the trash bins. Composite sketches were created based on these descriptions, but they were vague and contradictory. Nobody could agree on details. Weeks turned into months. The investigation continued, but leads grew cold. Detective Brennan refused to give up. She kept the case files on her desk. She reviewed witness statements over and over, searching for something she might have missed. She drove out to the crime scene on her days off, walking the area, trying to understand the mind of whoever had done this. She attended Amanda's memorial service and stood in the back, watching the faces in the crowd, wondering if the killer might be there among the mourners. By winter, the case had stalled. The chief reassigned Brennan to other investigations, though she was allowed to continue working the Crawford case whenever time permitted. The media coverage faded. Life in Riverside slowly returned to a cautious version of normal. But Janet and Robert Crawford would never be normal again. They visited their daughter's grave every week. They kept her bedroom exactly as she had left it. They waited for justice that seemed like it would never come. Then in the spring of 1983, something happened that changed everything. A young woman named Rebecca Mills was working the closing shift at a gas station on the outskirts of Riverside. It was nearly midnight when a man came in and asked to use the restroom. Rebecca thought nothing of it and pointed him toward the back. But the man did not go to the restroom. He locked the front door and grabbed Rebecca from behind. What followed was a terrifying ordeal that lasted nearly 14 hours. The man forced Rebecca into his van at gunpoint. He drove her to a remote location and tied her to a cot inside what appeared to be a converted cargo area. He shaved her head. He beat her with a belt. He assaulted her repeatedly. But Rebecca was strong and smart. She stayed calm. She looked for opportunities. When her attacker left the van to go to work the next morning, apparently confident that she was too terrified and restrained to escape, Rebecca managed to free one hand. She worked at the ropes until her wrists bled and finally got loose. She kicked out a rear window panel and squeezed through, running barefoot across a field until she found a house. The homeowner called the police immediately. Rebecca gave a detailed description of her attacker and his vehicle. She remembered the license plate number. Within 2 hours, officers had an address. The van belonged to Thomas Eugene Pritchard. He was 41 years old, worked as a facilities manager for the county, and lived alone in a well-maintained house on the north side of town. He had no criminal record. He was considered a quiet, professional member of the community. Detective Brennan was part of the team that executed the search warrant. She had been thinking about the Amanda Crawford case constantly since hearing about the attack on Rebecca Mills. The description of the van matched, the method matched, everything in her gut told her this was connected. When they entered Pritchard's residence, what they found confirmed her suspicions. The van in the garage was dark blue, an older model with custom interior work. The carpet was that same commercial-grade synthetic fiber. He owned a German Shepherd mix. In the bedroom closet, police found stacks of green tarps identical to the one used to wrap Amanda's body. There were coils of rope, rolls of duct tape, and several containers of spray paint. Forensic experts compared fibers from Pritchard's van to those found on Amanda's clothing. The match was confirmed. 12 individual fibers were microscopically identical in color, composition, and structure. The dog hairs also matched Pritchard's pet. Paint chips from the van's exterior matched the traces found on Amanda's jeans. The evidence was overwhelming. Thomas Pritchard was arrested and charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and attempted murder in the Rebecca Mills case. As the forensic results came back linking him to Amanda Crawford, additional charges of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder were added. The news shocked everyone who knew him. Coworkers described him as polite and competent. Neighbors said he kept to himself but always waved when passing by. Nobody suspected that behind the facade lived a predator. The trial began in the fall of 1984. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: fiber analysis, paint analysis, hair analysis. Witness testimony from Rebecca Mills, who bravely took the stand and recounted her ordeal. The defense argued that fiber evidence was circumstantial, that many vehicles had similar carpets, that the paint match was not conclusive. They suggested that someone else could have been responsible, that the evidence against Pritchard was coincidental. The jury deliberated for 6 days. The courthouse was packed with spectators. Janet and Robert Crawford sat in the front row every single day, holding hands, waiting. Detective Brennan sat nearby, her case files finally complete, her promise to Amanda finally kept. When the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. Guilty on all counts. Eugene Pritchard showed no emotion. He stared straight ahead as the judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing. 2 months later, Pritchard was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called the crimes heinous and depraved. He said that Pritchard had stolen the child's future and shattered a family's life. He said that while no sentence could bring Amanda back, the community could at least have closure, knowing that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, Janet Crawford spoke to reporters. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were red. She said that nothing would ever fill the hole in her heart, but knowing that Amanda's killer would never hurt another child gave her some measure of peace. She thanked Detective Brennan and the entire police department. She thanked the community for never forgetting her daughter. She asked that people remember Amanda not for how she died, but for how she lived, with kindness and joy and an open heart. Detective Brennan did not speak to the press that day. She stood at the back of the crowd and watched the Crawfords navigate their grief. Later, she would say that the case changed her, that it taught her the importance of persistence and the weight of responsibility that came with the badge. She kept a copy of Amanda's photograph in her desk drawer for the rest of her career. Every time she worked a difficult case, she would look at that photograph and remember why the work mattered. In the years that followed, more details about Thomas Pritchard emerged. Investigators discovered that he had moved to Riverside only 2 years before Amanda's murder. Before that, he had lived in 3 other states. In each location, there were unsolved cases involving young women and girls, assaults that were never connected, disappearances that were never explained. Pritchard was suspected in at least 4 other crimes, but evidence was insufficient for additional charges. He maintained his innocence in all cases, refusing to cooperate with investigators or provide any information about his past. The community of Riverside slowly healed, though the scars remained. The fairgrounds where Amanda was last seen eventually closed down. The land was sold and redeveloped into a small park. A bench was installed near the playground with a plaque that read, "In memory of Amanda Crawford, forever 11, forever loved." Parents brought their children there, and some of them told the story of the little girl who collected cans and smiled at everyone, whose light was taken too soon, but whose memory endured. The case became a reference point for law enforcement across the state. The fiber evidence and forensic techniques used in the investigation set precedents. Detective Brennan was promoted to sergeant and eventually became head of the department's Criminal Investigations Division. She lectured at police academies about the importance of meticulous evidence collection and the value of never giving up on a case, no matter how cold it became. Rebecca Mills, the young woman whose escape led to Pritchard's capture, struggled with trauma for years but eventually found her way forward. She became an advocate for assault survivors, speaking at support groups and working with organizations that provided resources for victims. She always said that she survived so that Amanda could have justice, that her escape was not just about saving herself, but about stopping a monster from claiming more victims. Thomas Pritchard died in prison 16 years into his sentence. He was 57 years old. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, though details were not made public. When news reached Riverside, reactions were mixed. Some felt relief that he was gone. Others felt cheated that he had not served more time. Janet and Robert Crawford released a brief statement saying they felt nothing, that Pritchard's death changed nothing about their loss, that Amanda was still gone and always would be. The case remains a touchstone for discussions about criminal justice, victim advocacy, and community response to violent crime. It's studied in criminology courses and cited in academic papers about cold case investigations. Documentaries have been made, books have been written, but for those who lived through it, for the family and friends of Amanda Crawford, it's not an academic exercise or a compelling narrative. It is a wound that never fully heals. Detective Brennan retired from the force after 30 years of service. In her retirement speech, she mentioned the Crawford case specifically. She said it was the investigation that defined her career, the one that taught her the most about human evil and human resilience. She said that every victim deserved someone who would fight for them, who would refuse to let their case become just another file in a cabinet. She said that justice delayed was still justice, and that hope, however fragile, was worth holding on to. The story of what happened in Riverside in 1982 is a story about loss and persistence. It is about a community that refused to forget. It is about a detective who refused to give up. It is about a survivor whose courage brought a killer to justice. It is about a little girl who deserved so much more than the fate that found her on a summer afternoon. The years have passed, but the memory endures. The case is closed, but the impact remains. Some things cannot be undone, but they can be remembered. Some losses cannot be healed, but they can be honored. That is what Riverside chose to do. That is what they continue to do.